Hi everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to the channel. For those who don't know me, my name is Bruno Villas, and today I'm going to tell you another story. But before that, I have a really good message to share with you. Many times during my research I come across content entirely in English, and translating is quite complicated because I still don't fully master the language. With that in mind, I enrolled in a course at English for You, which is a really cool school. The classes are conducted via Zoom. They are completely dynamic and very interactive, and I really like them. So I talked to my teacher Bartira to get some perks for you because I know that, like me, many people struggle with the language. And teacher Bartira can help you by contacting the school and saying you watch my channel, you won't pay an enrollment fee, get a 50% discount on the study materials, and discounts of up to 30% on the type of class you choose. I will leave the school's contact information in a pinned comment, so if you're interested in learning a new language, just get in touch with them. Well, folks, without further ado, let's get to today's case. So Bruno Eustaquio Vieira was born and raised in the city of Guarujá, which is a beach town located on the coast of the state of São Paulo, here in Brazil. Bruno lived with his mother, whose name was Marcia Lanzani, and there is no official information regarding his biological father. What is known is that Marcia Lanzani would wake up very early and worked hard to support the household. She was always a very hard-working woman, and due to her great effort and determination, she managed to provide a bit of comfort for her son. They didn't have a luxurious life, but the exhausting hours of work made Marcia fulfill with distinction the role of head of the family. Because of this, nothing was lacking for the young man within their means, of course. If we stop to think about it, it's always like this, right, folks? We always hear from our parents that they always want to give us what they didn't have when they were younger, when they were teenagers. But despite all his mother's efforts, Bruno began to feel bothered and found what he had to be insufficient. Nothing satisfied him. He always wanted more. The clothes had to be branded. His electronic devices had to be new, without exception. And he always wanted the latest releases. And money for weekend outings could not be lacking. Marcia was doing her best to meet all the young man's demands. A few years later, Bruno decided he wanted to study medicine. It is evident that his mother supported him. After all, what mother wouldn't be proud to have a son who is a doctor? Just the idea of having a son graduated in medicine already made Marcia overflow with satisfaction and joy. However, we need to remember that we already know that the medical course in Brazil is extremely expensive and requires a lot of effort and dedication. Even if the student chooses to study in the public education system, he will have to dedicate himself a lot to his studies because the spots in public universities are very competitive. The solution is to take a preparatory course. The problem is that the investment in a pre-university course for the medical program is quite high. But even so, with all these obstacles emerging, Marcia bravely supported her beloved son. She then continued to struggle to finance his studies so that this dream could become a reality soon. When Bruno started studying, he quickly expanded his network of friends, made many friends in the preparatory course, and formed friendships with students in medicine and related fields. When he got closer to the medical students, he realized that those people, for the most part, were individuals with high purchasing power. People from wealthy and influential families, people who did not work and who frequented the best places in the city and also lived in the best neighborhoods of the city and drove the best cars. Bruno was impressed by that lifestyle and was also dazzled by the possibility that those people had of having the best of everything at their fingertips just by using a credit card, often a black card, practically without limits. That life seemed perfect and Bruno envied it. Bruno lived with his mother in a slightly simpler neighborhood. The house was comfortable and cozy, but that was no longer enough for the young man. The house they lived in was located in the Sítio Cachoeira neighborhood, and he began to frequently tell his mother that the house was far from everything and that they needed to move from there and look for a place closer to the center and surroundings. After much insistence from Bruno regarding the location of the house, the difficulties he had been facing in getting around, Marcia found a very practical solution and ended up giving the young man a motorcycle to get around the city more quickly. For her, the problem was solved, although she had incurred a new debt to pay. And if you think that was enough for Bruno, I'm sorry to inform you, but that's a terrible mistake. It's true that now he had a fast and economical motorcycle, and he could move around the city freely, and distance was no longer an excuse. However, Bruno began to argue with his mother that when he called his new friends to come to his house, he felt embarrassed because the neighborhood was very simple and also very far away. Their neighborhood was quite different from the neighborhoods where his friends lived. He wanted in every way for Marcia to sell or rent that house and move to an upscale neighborhood. Marcia insisted on saying that she couldn't afford the luxury that Bruno was wanting, especially in a more expensive neighborhood. She always tried to convince her son that the townhouse where they lived was more than enough for them. The space was comfortable, and she did everything to make it welcoming, including for her son's new friends. She welcomed everyone with open arms. She also said that he shouldn't be ashamed, because if they were truly Bruno's friends, they would understand that although they were of humble origin, his mother made an effort to provide the best for her son. Unfortunately, all this talk didn't make any change in the way Bruno saw things. He really wanted to live the ostentatious lifestyle that his friends lived. And that arrogant way of dealing with the people around him caused several fights and arguments between him and his mother. She always reminded him that he already lived a luxurious life compared to the life she herself had when she was young. He only wore good clothes, frequented the best places with his friends, and had the freedom to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wished. But even so, he didn't feel like he was part of that group, and he thought that the solution to feel complete would be for him to live in a new house in an upscale neighborhood. In December 2020, the fights intensified and things started to get out of control. On December 22nd, 2020, according to what Bruno later told the investigators, he returned from the gym and found his mother unconscious on the floor. He checked her vital signs and found that there was no pulse. He then called a friend of his who explained to him how to provide first aid, and then he called SAMU for immediate assistance. SAMU, folks, is the rapid first aid service here in Brazil. It's the emergency service for when someone has an accident or emergencies related to immediate medical assistance. As soon as SAMU arrived, the paramedic found that Marcia was no longer alive. Bruno continued his statement, saying that he called his aunt and told her what had happened. According to this version from Bruno, his mother had slipped on the family dog's urine, lost her balance, and fell. Due to the intensity of the fall, she had hit her head and died. It is worth noting that at another time he told investigators that he thought his mother had a heart attack, but this version is easily contradicted. The medical examiner carefully analyzed the body and determined that the cause of Marcia's death was strangulation. He also recorded in the document that she had a cut on her head and a broken bone in her neck. After this document reached the hands of the police, everything started to get complicated. A person cannot die from strangulation alone. Accidentally, there must be another person at the crime scene, because someone strangled her. At the moment, the medical examiner was working on issuing the report related to the case of Marcia. Bruno was suffering on his social media, saying that he was in mourning and that he would never stop loving his queen. He was referring to his beloved mother. Well, as soon as it was determined that it was not an accidental death, but rather a murder, it was now time to investigate. At this point, you must already be imagining who it might be. The main suspect in taking the life of Marcia Lanzani. Yes, it was him, Bruno, the victim's own son. Among the controversial versions that Bruno presented to the police was a statement from Bruno in which he justified that his mother had slipped while getting out of the shower and that this would have caused her death. However, Bruno's aunt, named Marilza, who was the victim's sister, said that her sister was on a video call with him on the 21st and was wearing the same clothes in which she was found dead, and said that if it were the case that she had gone to take a shower, she would probably have changed clothes, She even confronted her nephew, saying that if he had done something, he could tell her, but he obviously denied it after. From this, the police discovered that the family home was equipped with surveillance cameras. Investigators requested the recordings by the relevant authorities for further detailed analysis, so they could view the footage. However, they did not find the device that contained the recorded images. The investigators began to pressure Bruno to say where the device with the images was. At first, he tried to dodge the question, but shortly after, he couldn't withstand the pressure and ended up giving the clues they needed. The investigators ended up finding the device with the images inside the oven of the stove in the kitchen of the residence. Bruno said he hid the device because he was afraid of being incriminated for something he didn't do. It turns out that when analyzing the images on the 21st, a day before discovering Marcia's lifeless body, indeed, in her residence, the hallway camera managed to capture, even from a distance, through the victim's bedroom door, a movement that left the investigators speechless. Bruno and Marcia got into a physical altercation. They fell to the ground, and although the image isn't very clear, due to the camera's distance, you can see that Bruno strangles her on the floor. He checks her vital signs and then leaves his mother's body where it was and closes the door, which prevents the camera from filming the victim any longer. Then, Bruno goes to the living room and starts watching TV. When questioned, he says he doesn't remember the sequence of events, but that he had an argument with his mother, but that she was alive and even talked to him before going to sleep, and that he only found her lifeless the next day. After returning from the gym, he asserts with certainty that she did not die at the time of the fight, and yes, the next day. However, there are no images of Bruno's mother walking around the house after the argument. And the next day the images were no longer recorded because probably Bruno had already disconnected the recording device from the cameras. After the surveillance camera footage was revealed, and also with the contradictions in the statements, it led to Bruno being indicted for qualified intentional homicide when there is intent to kill for a vile motive. On June 1st, 2021, the court granted the public prosecutor's request and decreed the preventive detention of the young man, but it was already too late. Bruno had already disappeared. He was declared a fugitive. In a statement, Bruno's lawyer says he intends to overturn the decision of preventive detention and that if he does not succeed, Bruno will turn himself in. According to him, his client is afraid of suffering some violence. Because of the case, at all times Bruno says he is innocent and that he was not responsible for his mother's death. The police, however, upon concluding the investigation, say that the only one responsible for Marcia's death was Bruno. As he denies committing the crime, we do not know the real motivation. But within the entire context in which the case occurred, many speculate that it was a financial crime. The most acceptable hypothesis is that Bruno would receive a life insurance payout from his mother and also intended to take immediate possession of all her assets. Thus, the hypothesis that fits best is that Bruno took the life of his own mother because of the inheritance. Bruno's lawyer says that Donna Marcia only had a property and a car, and that he believes his client would not commit such an atrocity for so little. I need to remind you that although Bruno's lawyer said that if he couldn't overturn the preventive detention, he would turn himself in, he did not turn himself in and is still on the run. In fact, the police have generated some images of how Bruno might be disguised, and I will show them to you now. If anyone has seen Bruno or has any information, just call the police number and say that you spotted a fugitive. Well, folks, I also want to know your opinion. Do you think that Bruno is really not responsible for this crime? Leave your opinion in the comments below. Well, folks, that was today's video. I'll stop here and see you in the next video.